series. And we are welcoming Kara Espy Brown to the podcast today. Kara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and thank you so much.
So I'm going to just give you a little introduction about Kara. Kara Espy Brown is a self-published author of The Scarring of the Rosh Anara, and I may not be saying that correctly, but that is the name of the book. And you can tell me later how to pronounce it because we want to pronounce it correctly. The first book, this is the first book in a potentially 8-book series. She will release her second novel, The Crystal of Shamalah, in spring of 2023. She writes dark psychological fantasies with plenty of light to heal from trauma from her past, even putting her own memories in the story with fantasy twist. She writes multiple POVs to empathize with herself and others, learning psychology and connecting her lost loved ones. When not writing, she reads, she sings, she draws, she paints, and explores various aspects of life, and spends plenty of quality time with her husband, whom she met in Afghanistan. Their 2 dogs, they have 2 dogs, they have 2 cats, and they earn their spots in her writing as well. Throughout her life, Kara has struggled to understand who she is under the surface. Without understanding herself, she disassociated and lived in her fantasy world, ignoring the traumatic issues in her life and compartmentalizing them inside herself. When past therapists pushed her towards prolonged exposure therapy, she didn't have the coping skills to do it safely. So she chose to expose herself to the traumas through discovery writing. Fantasy light drenched with pain. Over the past 7 years, she's learned her strengths and her weaknesses. She's accepted her darkness to bring out her light, and she has learned to set boundaries, a skill she hadn't learned in childhood. Though triggers still affect her, she can handle them without forgetting who she is. Even on panic days, she remembers her values. The best part, she craves a future instead of craving death. And that last sentence is very, very powerful, I will say.
It's not all or nothing suicidal ideation, still comes and goes, but it's without intent. That usually just means I'm exhausted and I need sleep and I need to take a step back and reassess what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's always good to do. Mm-hmm. You don't want to push yourself.
Oh, no. Oh, mm-hmm. Yes and no.
Yes and no. Gotcha.
Sometimes you got to push past the depression, but
yes, yeah. That's true. That's true.
So tell me, did I pronounce and say the names of the books again one more time?
The Scarring of the Roshan Ra.
Roshan
is the Persian Dari word for light. Ra is my inner child. So it's essentially bringing out the light from my inner child. Okay. Although when I started writing that word just came out and I didn't know why. I just knew Roshan. I wanted to bring out my light.
Okay.
The Crystal of Shamalah. I do too. Like the Crystal of Shamalah is, it's kind of a combination of shamanic journeys and shame. And like the Allah is like Kala. And Kala is, so there's a possibility that my compartmentalized states are different personalities that were blocked inside of me. So essentially by writing these, I'm connecting all the parts of myself to myself, so I become a human instead of just this spirit wandering around people pleasing everybody.
Okay, I like that. I do. There's so many different ways that people deal with trauma, and like you have PTSD as well, so, however you can deal with that and be healthy in it, I think is the best, whatever you can do to make you the best you, then you do that.
That's really all you can do. Like trying to control others doesn't help anything. But trying to control yourself and be who you are, it's essentially taking out the repressed parts of yourself so that you have a thriving life instead of just surviving.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to just go on just like living. You want to thrive in your life. You don't want to just be, doing the same thing all the time and
Yeah,
just kind of being there.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I read about 75% of it, of the scarring of the Rosh Hashanah. Am I saying it right? Rosh Hashanah? I'm probably not saying it right.
Roshan Ra.
Rosh Hashanah. Okay, I read about 75%. I didn't finish it yet.
Okay, it's fine.
But tell us how you met your husband in Afghanistan.
I love this story. It was my second time going to Afghanistan, and I had this, I wanted to go to the same place that I went. It was with a different contracting company, but I'm like, I want to go back to Bagram. I'm familiar with the place. So I get there and I meet my husband. But, I tend to have this fear of males, but at the same time, I tend to push past my fears and like drive toward them. So he wasn't creepy. And honestly, like the first time we met, it was at an Afghan New Year party, and it was just before I was starting work. I was still jet lagged. I was sitting there eating some naan with some butter and just listening to music, watching people dance around, being my introverted self, even though I had the urge to be extroverted because I was pushed that way when I was a child. So he sits next to me, and I realized I had an urge to get close to him. It was a similar energy to my father, who passed away 6 months after one of my most violent traumas. And the energy was just so soothing, and it confused me, but I just wanted to be near him. So he got up and he went to get some drink and came back. He had bumped his head. And I was like, oh, are you okay? And I checked for bleeding and everything. But it was just a really lovely night. And we started hanging out together a little bit. I followed him around like a little chilled night girl, like schoolgirl. And I loved his musical inspiration. I'm allergic to tobacco, but I would sit at the smoke shack to listen to him. And he ended up leaving for reasons. And then when he returned, we ended up going on a coffee date together. I had issues stemming from sexual assault where I was promiscuous. And that really just, I had a trouble accepting myself and didn't realize that I was in love with him until basically I felt safe and my flashbacks started happening. So it was a very traumatic time, still in Afghanistan, working sometimes 84 hours a week, plus I was doing school and other activities. So I had to get a divorce because I was married at the time to a really controlling partner who wasn't really a partner. It was just this whole other story I don't want to get into right now.
That's fine.
But it just, he's different. And I was able to be my weird self, just going rah, 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 with him and not being called weird and not considering him weird. And just over time, our bond is strengthened, but at the same time, we've both struggled. And that's one of the reasons why I write multiple POVs. Daniel in the book is inspired by my husband, but not exactly the same as my husband. It's the lessons I've learned from him. And that's usually how I write when I'm discovering different characters. It's what I need to learn from that character.
Mm-hmm.
He's your soulmate.
I like to say he's my twin flame, but
that
also,
too. I was thinking of that too.
also, I don't want to have that narcissistic twin flame. Like twin flames still require a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like the more connected you are to a person, the more you love a person, it drives you to grow.
Right.
And there's a balance between growing and changing who you are. Like,
mm-hmm.
one of the things I love about him, I'll be in my people pleasy thing and like, please help me make a decision. He's like, you're smart enough to make your own decisions. Like,
Yes.
go handle things on your own, then come back to me and tell me what's going on.
Right.
It's that tricky balance with two empaths who both have emotional difficulties coming together and helping each other instead of triggering each other all the time.
Right. See, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, it's chaotic and beautiful.
Right. But he kind of pushes you to be that individual,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to
Yeah.
make your decision for
Exactly.
you.
Yes.
Right.
And as long as I'm honest and not trying to be a douchebag, like, it works.
That's a new one. That's funny. Oh my gosh. So, I read the book like a couple times. And I did when I first got it last year, and then I read it again when I knew you were coming on the show. And even though I'd already known what was going to happen, you know, it's still, we should probably tell people that your book does have trigger warnings.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, PTSD, rape, torture, what else? Suicide.
Yeah, and like even childhood sexual abuse.
Yes. So we just want to let people know that beforehand, you know, in our discussion here, we might get into a little bit of that. We will try not to overdo it or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to feel comfortable, you know, answering questions,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. But we just kind of wanted to know more about you. And I do have some questions. This is the book that we were talking about. So definitely get it. It's an amazing book. If you have any kind of traumas, like I said, there are trigger warnings. So we want to give you that heads up. So what I kind of want to know is, what made you decide to go into writing when you were in the military? I mean, or after you were done?
I started writing when I was a child. I was about 11 or 12. And my daddy was a truck driver. I saw a roadrunner and a tumbleweed at a stop sign. And I asked him, Daddy, are cartoons real? And his answer was something like, in a sense, they are real because they come from people's experiences. Mm-hmm. And so he introduced me to his cousin, who's Martha Bolton. And like, she's had a pretty successful writing career. I think she's still writing. So I was able to talk to her and kind of interview her on just what it was like to be an author. And I wrote my first short story, and it was called The Day When Pigs Flew. About
cute.
A little girl who was like struggling with self-esteem, but she wanted to win a talent show. And people were like, "You'll only win when pigs flew." And so, like,
that's cute.
I want to recreate it.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of lost touch with that writing desire when I was a teenager after several sexual assaults. That to me was the curse of being an empathetic people pleaser. Because I didn't see it as something I didn't want because I only felt what they wanted.
Right.
So in a sense, the things that happened to me, I took them personally. And it caused me a lot of shame to where I didn't feel like I even deserved to have the things I desired in life. So when I started writing again, it was about 3 years after my divorce, or no, 2 years after my divorce was finalized. And once things are finalized and true memories come up, it gets even more chaotic. And we both got inpatient hospitalized. I had trouble keeping a job, ended up being diagnosed with PTSD and the depersonalization derealization syndrome, 100% disabled. And I knew that to be true. Like, I could not hold a job. So we separated. At the time, I had this hope that we would get back together.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing because I knew I needed to process the emotions and memories in a way that was a fantasy light, because as I empathize with other people more than I empathize with myself, it made sense to have characters that represented me but not be me.
Right.
So I didn't realize it was going to be multiple POV when I started.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a YA fantasy, but that got creepy really fast. So
Sure. Yeah, we got to change that, huh?
I aged them up, but I still thought it was just going to be a high fantasy.
Yeah.
But as I'm an intensely joyful person, it makes sense that my negativity would be intense as well.
Right.
There's the spectrum.
Empathy. Empaths have their feelings are very into. I'm an empath to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can tell when people that aren't even with me that something is going on.
Yeah.
I can feel the emotions somewhere because I know it's not coming from me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So I definitely get where you're coming from. Definitely the emotions go from one end to the other, but they're very intense, like you said.
But the writing of it's essentially, it gets it out of my head. When I reread it, I remember the lessons I've learned from it. Because with the personality disorders and the identity disruptions,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes daily, like there are cycles where daily I forget who I am. Sometimes for a week on end, I have no willingness to do what I want to do in life because I'm trapped in that psychotic brain.
Right.
So by writing on a more continual basis, I'm getting the junk out of my head so I can see reality as it is and accept, yes, there's negative stuff, but I'm breathing.
Mm-hmm.
I have 4 animals that love to cuddle. I have a husband who loves to cuddle. Like, I love the shows we binge watch. I love the books I can read. I love learning new things. And painting is something that helps me get into the writing mindset as well. Like if I'm stuck on descriptions, I'll paint them. Or I'll just kind of intuitively paint, and usually it's caves.
That's cool though.
Do you have a painting close by that you can show?
Oh, I have a wall. So
he has a lot of them.
There's one. That one's my safe place.
Oh, that's amazing.
And this is one of my walls. That one back there with the flowers is actually my friend Cherish. She gave it to me. Have some more over here, and I even have I have 6 on walls elsewhere. One that I gave to my husband, and then several that I might update.
She actually has an Etsy site that you do like the artwork on notebooks that you sell, correct?
I have 2 up there so far. I'm planning on adding more whenever my brain gets me to actually scan them into the computer.
Right. No, they're really neat though. I mean,
I also have so this one's one I found, and it's kind of like a map.
Oh, how cool.
And then so I have a couple of characters of ours. This one's Kala.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
This one is this one's the Forseer. She's introduced in book 1, but we'll talk to her more in book 2. And this one is Labas Khaprazai.
Oh wow.
And she's going to be the first. It's not the same countries, but essentially African American character.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I wanted to be more diverse in the world, but the antagonists are separationists. So
Right.
part of their journey is to connect different cultures so that people, like empaths are empaths.
Yeah.
People are people. It doesn't matter who is in the group as long as they're trying to help the world.
Right.
So it's been fun just learning the different things I can do that might not enhance my career, but enhance my sanity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this is probably therapy for you, right?
Yes.
Writing. And I was wondering how that kind of worked. Like, you were just saying, I think the painting, anything that brings out your imagination and your creativity, um, is probably highly helpful when it comes to um, maybe dealing with some of, you know, the trauma and things like that. I guess getting it out there. So not so everyone knows, but so you know,
Yeah.
maybe, you know?
It does that. I have mostly my art on my wall just to remind myself that I am capable. Like
Yeah.
I'm not the ditzy blonde. I might be sometimes, but I have more to offer myself and the world than I thought. But I need to help myself first, because without that, I deplete myself and become like just basically a worm slithering on the
Yeah.
ground, taking up all the nutrients.
All right.
So
Well,
did you when you wrote your first book, did you base it on like books that you liked reading and or TV shows that you enjoyed? Like, is this a story that kind of takes place in another, like Stranger Things, there's like another world that's like they call in Stranger Things, they call it the Upside Down, which is
Yeah.
still the same world, but it's like can be manipulated in time and space and different things are happening during that. Is it similar to that? Like it's kind of like a parallel
Mhm.
universe type of thing?
It's the magical twin to Earth's logical world.
right.
I didn't intentionally base it on anything else, but with anybody, uh, creative work will have traits of other things that they've absorbed, even societal things that might not be something that they've read or watched, but there are elements of, you know, the room of requirement in the void. And also it's kind of like the Wheel of Time, where, you know, you can travel through the astral realm basically. But I didn't intentionally base it on that. It was stuff that came out, and I noticed the similarities, but I noticed the differences as well. If I write something and it's too similar to something else, I'll adjust it or take it out. But it's mostly based on my experiences. Dirawa is basically how I see the world when I'm anxiously attached or depressed. It's the world I would travel in my astral dreams. I have very lucid dreams sometimes, and they're often more real than reality. So it's kind of expressing that so I can get in touch with this world,
Right.
because that's where the people that I love are.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, I'm
Yeah.
just trapped.
Right. Now, have you ever thought about writing in like a different genre ever, or are you gonna stick with like the dark psychological fantasy type stuff for now?
I have a couple more things in mind. This one, I want to get finished, partly because my family is very prone to starting things and not finishing.
And you're like, I am finishing it.
And so this was kind of a promise that I made to my daddy, like when I was doing a meditation one time. It's like, I'm going to finish the series before I do something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have short stories that I want to transform into novels. Like I have one that is a erotica romance, but not like again douchebag. It's not like the controlling BDSM, but it's like a trauma survivor who adapts when she has urges. And it's kind of like two people who struggle with sexuality traveling the world and boning, I guess.
Oh my gosh.
What's funny though is I also have a couple of children's books in mind, and then I have like a straight up romance
Right.
based on another nightmare that I had. So
So it's based on a nightmare.
And then I also have kind of a mystery in mind. It's really based on what I feel I'm ready for next. I also want to do at least a trilogy YA in the same world of Doraba after the series.
After the series is done.
Yeah.
Okay. That's nice. Okay, so someone's asking, what platform will you be publishing your books on? So you are on Amazon, I know for sure.
And I
Are you
also
anywhere
publish
else?
through Draft to Digital.
Okay.
So it's on Nook. I cannot remember which ones they're. I think Kobo is one. It's not on Google Play right now.
Okay.
I'm wanting to try my hand at publishing paperback on Barnes and Noble as well.
Okay.
I
I know Carrie does that. Don't you?
Well, I have done a couple of books with Barnes and Noble. All of my books are on Amazon, and at least one of them is in Ingram Spark. But Ingram Spark is really for retailers, independent booksellers. But all of them are on Amazon, and I did a few through Barnes and Noble. But they're hardback. They're hardback with the nice dust jacket.
Yeah.
So Amazon has offered a hardback version, but it's not the dust jacket version. It's a hardcover.
Yeah.
Have the nice dust jacket, which I prefer the nice dust jacket because I think when you think about novels with nice dust jackets, they just look more superb than what Amazon produced when they came out with the hardcover, which I wasn't sure what the hardcover was going to look like until I got it. So
I'm kind of the opposite.